Picture this. A man sits alone in a crowded cafe. Around him, laughter bounces off the walls, glasses clink, and conversations spiral into trivial banter about weekend plans, sports scores, or the latest viral distraction. Yet his mind is not there. His thoughts pierce deeper, wandering into the labyrinth of existence itself. Why are people so quick to fill silence with noise? Why does pleasure vanish the moment it is grasped? Why, if knowledge is supposed to liberate, does it so often feel like a burden? He watches the world with eyes that seem to see too much, and feels the weight of seeing more clearly than others can bear. Here lies the paradox. The more intelligent a person is, the more prone they are to suffering. Shouldn't it be the opposite? If intelligence allows us to solve problems, create beauty, and master the world, why does it so often create despair rather than joy? Shouldn't knowing more make life easier, not harder? And yet, history whispers a different story. From tormented poets to suicidal philosophers, from misunderstood visionaries to isolated geniuses, the pattern is unmistakable. Those who think the deepest feel the most. Arthur Schopenhauer, that grim but unflinching prophet of pessimism, once declared, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." To him, existence itself was a tragedy, one driven by endless striving, desire, and disillusionment. For the ordinary mind, this truth remains blurred, numbed by distraction and small pleasures. But for the keenly intelligent, distraction is fragile and illusion is short-lived. They see the raw machinery of life, the perpetual hunger that no achievement satisfies, the restless grasping for meaning in a universe that offers none. This is the cruel irony. Intelligence sharpens perception, but clarity cuts. The genius, the visionary, the thinker, they cannot unsee what they have seen. They cannot return to the warm embrace of ignorance, where simple joys still glow untainted by analysis. And so they wander through life like exiles, longing for the simplicity that their own brilliance has destroyed. Think of the child who gazes at the night sky in awe. The stars sparkle, infinite, magical. Now think of the astronomer who has mapped their distances, their inevitable deaths, the vast silence between them. The child dreams of wonder. The astronomer feels the abyss. What once inspired joy now whispers of futility. Knowledge has stripped away the veil, and what remains is not wonder, but weight. We like to imagine intelligence as a blessing, a crown of superiority. But what if it is, in truth, a curse, a subtle poison that corrodes from within? What if the very ability to think beyond the immediate, to ask the forbidden questions, and to dissect reality with relentless precision makes life less livable? Perhaps this is why so many of history's greatest minds lived lives shadowed by melancholy, alienation, or madness. And yet, here we stand in the same dilemma ourselves. We strive to know more, to learn more, to peer into the depths of existence, believing knowledge will free us. But every layer peeled back exposes another layer of despair. Every answer births more questions. Every achievement proves hollow with time. The more the mind grasps, the more it realizes how little there is to hold on to. Is it possible, then, that ignorance is not merely bliss, but salvation? And if so, what does that mean for those who cannot retreat into the comfort of unknowing? For the intelligent, the veil has already been torn, and the abyss stares back with unblinking eyes. The tragic genius is not a myth, it is a condition. It is the existential wound of those cursed to think too deeply, feel too fully, and see too clearly. Intelligence isolates. It cuts the cord that ties us to the comfort of the crowd. It amplifies pain because it recognizes pain's inevitability. It exposes suffering not as an accident of life, but as its very foundation. And yet, within this tragedy lies something magnetic, something that calls us closer rather than repels us. We cannot look away from the lives of these suffering geniuses because, in some hidden way, their pain reflects our own. Their torment makes visible the truths we dare not face in ourselves. So here is the question that lingers, burning, unsettling. Is the suffering of the intelligent a flaw to be cured or a truth to be embraced? Is there a way through the tragedy? Or must we accept that to think deeply is to suffer deeply? The cafe noise continues. The laughter grows louder, but the man does not hear it. He is staring into the abyss within himself, into the haunting realization that brilliance does not guarantee joy. In fact, it may ensure its opposite. And it is here, in this paradox, that we must begin our exploration. If the suffering of the intelligent is not a coincidence, then where does it come from? To answer this, we must descend into the soil of philosophy and psychology to uncover the tangled roots that feed the tragic genius. Arthur Schopenhauer believed life itself was animated by a blind, ceaseless force he called the will. Not the rational will of choice or morality, but a deeper primal current, an insatiable striving that pushes every creature to survive, reproduce, consume, and struggle without rest. For most people, this will is masked by the distractions of daily life. Work, pleasure, relationships, and ambition act as veils, keeping the tormenting futility of existence out of view. But the more intelligent the mind, the thinner that veil becomes. Sharpness of thought pierces illusion, and the truth emerges naked and merciless. Life is endless striving without final fulfillment. The intelligent suffer not because they fail to achieve, but because they see achievement itself for what it is, temporary, hollow, already fading the moment it is grasped. To Schopenhauer, ordinary people live in dreams. The genius lives awake, unable to close his eyes. Nietzsche, though often cast as Schopenhauer's philosophical heir and rebel, sharpened this diagnosis further. He saw that intelligence amplifies suffering because it dissolves certainty. Faith, tradition, morality, those sturdy frameworks that anchor the common person, collapse under the weight of relentless questioning. The intelligent tear away at these structures, exposing the abyss beneath. God is dead, Nietzsche declared, not as a triumph, but as a lament, for he knew the void left behind. Without the consolations of simple belief, the intelligent are left unmoored, drifting in a sea of meaninglessness they themselves have uncovered. Carl Jung added yet another dimension, the burden of consciousness itself. For Jung, intelligence deepens self-awareness, but with it comes confrontation with the shadow, the repressed chaos within us that most would rather never meet. The ordinary mind may repress or deny its darker impulses, but the intelligent cannot look away so easily. Their very lucidity forces them into dialogue with demons others never dare to name. Genius does not shield one from the unconscious. It magnifies its presence, demanding a reckoning with the dark undercurrents of the psyche. And then there is Sartre, who carried the torch of existentialism into the 20th century. His insight was brutal. Consciousness is both our gift and our curse. We are condemned to be free, thrown into a universe without inherent meaning, forced to create our own purpose while knowing it is provisional, fragile, absurd. The intelligent, with their sharpened awareness, feel this condemnation more acutely. They see that freedom is not liberation, but responsibility without ground, and that existence is a theater in which we play roles, while secretly aware the stage is void. Across these thinkers runs a single thread. Suffering is not an accident that befalls the intelligent, but the natural consequence of seeing reality too clearly. The will endlessly drives. Meaning dissolves under scrutiny. The shadow emerges. The void yawns open. Ordinary minds can ignore, repress, or distract themselves. But the genius has no such luxury. His very nature compels him to peel away illusion, even at the cost of peace. Psychology confirms what philosophy intuited. Neuroscience has shown that highly intelligent individuals are more prone to anxiety, depression, and rumination. Their brains do not rest easily. They turn problems over endlessly, caught in loops of overanalysis. What others dismiss or forget, the intelligent cling to and dissect. This tendency, known as hyper-reflection, creates an endless mirror in which every thought reflects another, spiraling into paralysis. And so the intelligent suffer twice, once from the harsh truths they perceive, and again from their inability to stop perceiving. They cannot simply switch off the machinery of thought. Where another person shrugs and moves on, the genius gnaws at the question, the paradox, the problem, until it becomes a wound that never heals. Aldous Huxley once wrote, "The more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline towards the religion of solitude." Here lies another origin of the suffering genius: isolation. The intelligent are set apart not only by what they see, but by their inability to share it. Words fracture under the weight of their insights, and conversations falter. Surrounded by others, they feel alone, like strangers among their own kind. And yet, this isolation is not entirely imposed from outside. It is chosen as much as it is suffered. For what companionship can compare to the intimacy of one's own thoughts? The tragedy is that the very place they seek refuge, their own mind, is also the place of greatest torment. So what is left? If Schopenhauer's will is endless, Nietzsche's God is dead, Jung's shadow is unavoidable, and Sartre's freedom is condemnation, then what hope is there for the intelligent? Is suffering not only inevitable, but essential? Perhaps genius and despair are two sides of the same coin, inseparable, bound together by the very structure of existence. And yet, there remains a subtle glimmer, a possibility not fully extinguished. For while philosophy explains the origins of suffering, it also hints at a transformation hidden within it. Maybe the intelligent are not doomed merely to endure their curse. Maybe there is another way of looking at their tragedy, one that does not erase pain, but redefines it. That possibility leads us to the next question. If intelligence condemns us to suffering, how does that suffering shape the world we live in? What does it mean for individuals, for society, when its brightest minds are also their most tormented? What happens when the most perceptive among us are also the most tormented? The consequences ripple far beyond the individual psyche. They saturate culture, history, and the very atmosphere of our collective existence. The intelligent do not suffer in isolation. Their heightened awareness, their restless questioning, inevitably bleeds into their work, their art, their politics, and their relationships. They leave traces of their despair in literature, philosophy, music, and invention, gifts and burdens handed down to generations. But before we celebrate these contributions, we must confront the shadow they cast. Consider the personal cost. Psychological research reveals that highly intelligent individuals are more prone to overthinking and rumination, a cognitive loop in which the mind circles endlessly around the same problem without resolution. What begins as curiosity mutates into obsession, and what might have been a passing worry grows into an all-consuming storm. Depression and anxiety creep in, not as occasional intruders, but as familiar companions. Neuroscience suggests that the very neural wiring that grants intelligence, greater connectivity, heightened sensitivity to stimuli, also makes the mind more vulnerable to stress and overwhelm. In practical terms, this often means that intelligent people struggle with what others find simple: falling asleep, finding contentment in routine, silencing their minds long enough to enjoy an unexamined moment. Their brilliance does not grant them peace, it robs them of it. They are prisoners of a restless mind that refuses to rest. This spills into relationships. Imagine trying to connect with someone whose mind never quiets, who cannot resist dissecting every gesture, every word, every silence. To the intelligent, nothing is trivial. Everything is a symbol, a sign, a pattern to be analyzed. While others may chat easily over small talk, the genius feels suffocated by its emptiness, craving depth where depth is not always possible. As a result, intimacy becomes difficult, companionship strained. Many of history's greatest thinkers lived solitary lives, not only because society failed to understand them, but because they themselves could not tolerate the shallow waters where most relationships swim. And yet, their alienation fuels culture itself. The world we inhabit today, the novels we read, the theories we debate, the symphonies we hear, is drenched in the suffering of these minds. Dostoevsky's Portrait of Torment, Kafka's surreal alienation, Van Gogh's luminous canvases painted through madness. Each is an imprint of intelligence wrestling with despair. They turn their suffering into forms we can bear to face, even admire. In this way, their pain becomes humanity's mirror. But the impact is not always beautiful. The darker side of genius has driven ideologies, revolutions, and systems of thought that have reshaped history, for better and for worse. When the intelligent suffer, they do not suffer silently. They seek explanations, and in those explanations, they build new worlds. Nietzsche's abyss birthed existentialism. Marx's analysis of alienation gave rise to movements that toppled empires. Even the technologies we wield today often trace back to minds who, restless and unsatisfied, sought to master the void through invention. But invention born of despair carries its own risks. Nuclear weapons, surveillance systems, and the machinery of war were not conceived by content minds. They were the offspring of restless intelligence in search of control. Society at large both venerates and fears the tragic genius. On one hand, we crave their insights, their art, their vision. On the other, we pathologize their suffering, labeling them as unstable, maladjusted, or dangerous. We forget that what isolates them is precisely what allows them to reveal truths we cannot see ourselves. Their curse becomes our revelation. And yet, in commodifying their pain, society distances itself from it, celebrating the product while ignoring the torment that produced it. There is also a subtler, more insidious impact: cultural alienation. When the most intelligent voices express despair, it echoes through society, shaping collective moods. Schopenhauer's pessimism seeped into literature, art, and even politics. Sartre's existential despair reshaped the post-war consciousness of Europe. Today, when intelligent voices warn of climate collapse, AI dangers, or existential risk, Their clarity creates not comfort, but anxiety. The curse of intelligence is contagious. Once articulated, it cannot be unheard. This raises an unsettling possibility. The suffering of the intelligent is not only personal, but civilizational. Perhaps societies evolve not by the joy of their brightest minds, but by their discontent. Discontent drives questioning. Questioning drives innovation, and innovation reshapes the world, sometimes beautifully, sometimes catastrophically. Genius, in this light, is not society's blessing, but its double-edged sword. And for the individual living within this paradox, the trap is suffocating. Imagine perceiving reality so clearly that no illusion holds. Imagine knowing that joy is fleeting, that striving never ends, that meaning is provisional. Imagine being unable to forget these truths long enough to feel the warmth of an ordinary day. To live with such intelligence is to live with constant friction between the desire for peace and the impossibility of achieving it. And yet, it is here, in this unbearable tension, that a question begins to emerge. If the curse of intelligence is clarity, might clarity itself hold the seed of transformation? If suffering is inevitable for the intelligent, is it possible that suffering is not simply a torment, but a doorway? We have seen how the roots of suffering grow in philosophy and psychology, and how its impact shapes individuals and societies alike. Now we arrive at the threshold of something radical, a new way of perceiving the curse itself. Perhaps the intelligent are not condemned merely to endure their burden. Perhaps they are called to transmute it. If intelligence sharpens the blade that cuts us, the natural question is, can that same intelligence forge a way out? Must clarity only wound, or can it also liberate? Schopenhauer believed art and contemplation were the only reprieves from the tyranny of the will. When absorbed in music, painting, or philosophy, the restless drive of desire is temporarily silenced. For a moment, the genius is lifted outside of time, suspended in pure perception. It is no accident that so many tortured minds sought refuge in creation. Van Gogh painting fields of gold while drowning in despair, Beethoven composing symphonies as he slipped into silence, Kafka writing parables from within his own cage. Their works were not escapes from suffering, but transformations of it. They turned agony into beauty, despair into revelation, chaos into form. Nietzsche took this further. He saw suffering not as an obstacle to overcome, but as the very condition of greatness. One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. For Nietzsche, the tragic genius was not a victim, but a creator, one who dared to affirm life even in its cruelty. His concept of amor fati, the love of one's fate, suggested a radical reversal. Instead of resisting suffering, embrace it fully, as though you had chosen it. The intelligent suffer most because they see most. But if they can affirm even that suffering, they become more than mere victims. They become creators of meaning where none exists. Carl Jung, too, pointed to transformation. To him, the confrontation with the shadow was not simply a torment, but a necessity for wholeness. The intelligent person, forced into deeper self-awareness, must face their inner demons. But in facing them, they also integrate them, becoming fuller, richer, more complete beings. Jung saw individuation, the process of becoming one's true self, not as a path around suffering, but straight through it. The very weight that isolates the genius becomes the crucible of their transformation. And so the paradox begins to shift. Intelligence may bring despair, but despair itself can be alchemized. What crushes one person may awaken another. What isolates may also elevate. The curse of seeing too clearly becomes, in another light, the blessing of seeing possibilities invisible to others. This perspective is not theoretical, it has been lived. History offers countless examples of suffering transmuted into vision. Consider Friedrich Nietzsche, the poet who teetered on the edge of madness, yet gave the world lines of transcendent beauty. Or Viktor Frankl, who endured the abyss of Auschwitz and emerged with the philosophy of logotherapy, teaching that meaning can be found even in suffering itself. Or even Albert Einstein, who confessed that the clarity of his mind left him socially adrift, yet whose isolation gave birth to a new vision of the universe. These lives remind us of a crucial truth. Suffering, when embraced and shaped, becomes the wellspring of creation. The genius does not escape the tragedy of intelligence, but redefines it. Their suffering is not wasted. It is sculpted into something that speaks beyond them, into the marrow of human existence itself. Yet this transformation demands courage. It requires a refusal to numb oneself with distraction or collapse into despair. It asks of the intelligent mind to do something radical, to hold the abyss in view without turning away, and still choose to create, to affirm, to love, not despite suffering, but through it. In practical terms, this means learning to reframe despair as fuel. When the mind circles endlessly in rumination, that energy can be redirected into philosophy, poetry, art, or innovation. When isolation weighs heavy, it can be transformed into solitude, a space where depth can emerge. When clarity strips away illusion, it can be used not to destroy, but to illuminate. The very traits that curse the intelligent can become the tools of their liberation. But here lies the danger. Not all succeed in this transformation. Many geniuses burn out, crushed beneath the very weight that could have become their gift. The thin line between destruction and creation runs directly through their suffering. What separates those who collapse from those who transcend is not the absence of despair, but their relationship to it. And this is where the new perspective lies. Intelligence does not doom us to suffering. It demands of us a higher responsibility. To see clearly is to suffer, yes. But it is also to possess the raw material for meaning, for art, for truth. The abyss can devour, but it can also inspire. Perhaps the tragedy of genius is not that intelligent people suffer the most, but that they have the greatest potential to transform suffering into something greater. Theirs is not only a curse but a calling, to wrestle with despair until it yields its secret, until it becomes the very source of illumination. And so we arrive at the brink of the final revelation. If intelligence sharpens suffering, and suffering can be transmuted, what lies beyond this transformation? What is the ultimate truth that suffering reveals? Something deeper than tragedy, deeper than despair, a vision that reframes reality itself. If intelligence sharpens the wound, and suffering is the cost of clarity, then the question still lingers like smoke in the air. Is this all there is? Must the intelligent forever stagger beneath the weight of their own minds, condemned to see too much, to feel too deeply, to carry truths others are spared? Perhaps the final revelation is not to escape suffering, but to recognize that suffering is the very architecture of consciousness. To be human, to be aware, is to suffer. Intelligence only intensifies what was always there, stripping away the anesthetics of ignorance. The genius does not suffer because something has gone wrong. They suffer because they have seen what life truly is. Schopenhauer insisted that existence is tragedy. driven by the blind will, incapable of final fulfillment. He offered only temporary reprieves in art, compassion, and asceticism. But what if we take his vision one step further? What if the truth is not that life is tragic, but that tragedy itself is the essence of beauty, meaning, and creation? The intelligent suffer because they see that all things end. Every triumph fades, every joy dissolves, every life returns to dust. But in seeing this clearly, they also glimpse something others cannot: the infinite preciousness of what is fleeting. The flower is more beautiful because it will wither. Love is more urgent because it will end. The very futility Schopenhauer lamented may be the secret pulse of life's intensity. Only the intelligent, cursed with clarity, can fully grasp this paradox. Transience is not the enemy of meaning, it is its source. Nietzsche understood this in his Eternal Recurrence. The challenge to live as though every moment must be repeated forever, to embrace even suffering, even despair, as though it were chosen, and in that embrace, to affirm existence itself. Here lies the possibility of liberation for the tragic genius, not in fleeing suffering, not in denying it, but in willing it. To say yes to life, in all its cruelty, because within its cruelty lies its splendor. Carl Jung, too, points the way. The confrontation with the shadow, the descent into despair, is not a mistake. It is initiation. The genius suffers because they are called into deeper layers of the psyche, forced to wrestle with chaos so they might emerge more whole. Their suffering is not punishment, but passage, the archetypal journey into darkness that precedes transformation. They are not merely victims of intelligence, they are initiates into a deeper mode of being. But the revelation is larger still. Intelligence teaches us that the search for absolute meaning is futile, and yet this futility liberates us. If the universe offers no ready-made purpose, then purpose is not discovered but created. The intelligent suffer most because they feel the void most. But in that void lies infinite possibility. They are condemned to freedom, as Sartre said, but within that condemnation lies the power to sculpt life itself into meaning. This is the secret gift hidden within the curse. To suffer intelligently is to be thrust into the role of creator. The ordinary mind is content to consume meanings handed down by tradition, religion, or convention. The intelligent mind sees through them, and in that moment of despair becomes responsible for crafting its own. Their suffering is not wasted. It is the raw material from which worlds are built. Think of it. Without suffering, there is no art, no philosophy, no revolution, no revelation. The tragedies of genius are also the engines of culture. Beethoven's deafness gave us symphonies that still thunder through time. Dostoevsky's torment gave us novels that peel open the soul. Van Gogh's agony painted visions of light no one else could see. Their suffering did not destroy them, it became them, became their legacy, their transcendence. And so the ultimate revelation is this: the intelligent suffer the most not because they are cursed, but because they are chosen. Not chosen by some external God or destiny, but by the very structure of consciousness. They are the ones who see too much, feel too deeply, because they are the ones capable of shaping reality itself. Their suffering is not a prison, but a forge. Picture again the man in the cafe. He sits alone, haunted by his thoughts, overwhelmed by the noise of triviality around him. He sees too clearly, feels too much, despairs too deeply. But in that very despair lies his possibility. He can collapse beneath the weight, or he can transmute it into creation, into vision, into truth. His suffering is not an obstacle, it is his material. The final tragedy, then, is not that intelligent people suffer the most. The final tragedy would be if their suffering were wasted, if their clarity led only to silence, withdrawal, or destruction. But when their suffering is embraced, affirmed, transformed, it becomes more than tragedy. It becomes revelation. To see life as it is, tragic, fleeting, without inherent meaning, and to still say yes, to suffer deeply and yet create, to be cut by clarity and yet shape from that wound something beautiful, something true. This is the highest possibility of the tragic genius. And so we arrive at the unsettling conclusion: suffering is not the enemy of intelligence. It is its companion, its shadow, its test. To be intelligent is to suffer. But to suffer is also to be invited, to create, to affirm, to transform. Will you collapse beneath the weight of your own mind, or will you forge from it a meaning that transcends despair? That is the question intelligence demands of us. That is the revelation hidden in the tragedy. The cafe noise still echoes. The man lifts his gaze. Outside, the night sky spreads vast and silent. To the child, it is wonder. To the astronomer, it is abyss. To the genius, it is both. And in that paradox, both despair and beauty, both futility and meaning, the tragic genius finds not escape, but transcendence.